My dad was never a man of many words. Even when I was a kid, silence seemed to follow him everywhere. He wasn't cold or cruel. He just treated emotions like private things, things you buried deep and never shared. But after my mom died, that silence became heavier. It became a wall. The house changed after the funeral. Not suddenly, but slowly, like warmth leaving a room 1 degree at a time. Mom had been noise and movement. She sang while cooking, laughed at her own jokes, and somehow made every room feel alive. Without her, the house sounded hollow. Dad stopped talking almost immediately. He didn't cry in front of us. He didn't break down. He just moved through life like a ghost wearing my father's face. He still went to work. Still paid bills. Still reminded me to change the oil in my car. But emotionally, he was gone. At dinner, he'd stare at his plate for long stretches of time. Some nights I'd wake up and see the glow of the TV from the living room, only to find him sitting there in silence with the volume muted. The strangest part was that he never spoke about Mom. Not once. It was as if saying her name out loud would make the loss real in a way he couldn't survive. Over time, we adapted to the silence because that's what families do when they don't know how to heal. We learned to move around each other carefully, avoiding conversations that hurt too much. But there was one thing Dad did consistently. Every Sunday morning at exactly 9:30, he'd grab his keys, get into his old silver sedan, and disappear for 4 hours. No explanation. No destination. He always came back quieter than before, but somehow lighter too, like some invisible weight inside him had eased. I assumed he visited Mom's grave. Once, years ago, I asked if he wanted company. He froze for a second before softly saying, "No. I need to do this one alone." I never asked again. Then last month, Dad died. A heart attack. Quick and quiet, which somehow felt fitting for the man he'd become. After the funeral, I helped clean out his things. His glasses still sat beside his favorite chair. Half-finished crossword puzzles were scattered across the kitchen table. Then I got to the car. Dad loved that old sedan even though it rattled when it started and the AC barely worked. Sitting behind the wheel felt strange, like stepping into someone else's unfinished life. That's when I noticed the GPS attached to the windshield. It was ancient. One of those bulky old units people used before smartphones replaced them. Out of curiosity, I turned it on. The screen flickered weakly before loading. There was only one recent destination saved. 1422 Sycamore Lane. That was it. Not Mom's grave. Not our old house. Not a relative's address. I had never heard of it before. For some reason, seeing that single address unsettled me more than anything else I'd found since his death. It felt important, like a secret he'd left behind without meaning to. The next Sunday, I followed the route. It took me 2 towns over to a small public park tucked behind a quiet neighborhood. Nothing about it stood out. There was a pond, walking trails, and old benches beneath huge oak trees. I sat in my car for a while wondering if Dad had simply liked the peace there. Then I saw her. An elderly woman slowly walked toward a bench near the duck pond carrying a small thermos. She sat down carefully, poured tea into 2 paper cups, and placed one beside her. Then she waited. Every few minutes, she looked toward the parking lot. Every time a car approached before turning away, I watched disappointment spread across her face a little more. Something tightened painfully in my chest. I got out of the car and walked toward her. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened immediately. Not because she recognized me. Because she recognized him. I had my father's eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, she asked, "He's not coming, is he?" I sat beside her and told her my father had passed away a month earlier. She closed her eyes for a moment and nodded slowly, like part of her had already known. But she didn't cry. Instead, she handed me the second cup of tea. "We met here every Sunday for 5 years, she said softly. 5 years. The number stunned me. She smiled faintly while staring out at the pond. We never exchanged phone numbers. Never even learned each other's last names. We were just 2 people who lost the loves of our lives and didn't want to sit alone with the silence anymore. She told me they met by accident. Her husband had died around the same time Mom did. One Sunday, she had been sitting on that bench crying quietly when my father awkwardly asked if he could sit there too. That single conversation became a ritual. Every Sunday. Same bench. Same tea. Same quiet understanding. At first, Dad barely spoke. Sometimes he'd sit there for an hour saying nothing while she talked about grief and loneliness. But eventually, little by little, he opened up. She told me things about my father I had never heard before. How much he missed Mom's burnt toast in the mornings. How he still reached toward her side of the bed half asleep before remembering she was gone. Then she told me something that broke me completely. He thought he was failing all of you, she said gently. I looked at her in silence. He said he didn't know how to comfort his children because he was drowning himself. For the first time since the funeral, I cried. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Those Sunday drives were never an escape from us. They were survival. For 5 years, my father came to this park to practice being human again. To say the things he couldn't say at home. To let himself grieve somewhere safe so he could come back and try to be a father the rest of the week. As the sun began to set, she told me more stories. Stories about how Dad laughed when he relaxed enough to forget his sadness for a moment. How he kept old photos of Mom in his wallet and looked at them when he thought nobody noticed. It felt like meeting my father for the first time. When I finally stood to leave, she squeezed my hand gently. Thank you for coming, she said. I didn't want him to disappear completely. Back in my car, I looked at the GPS screen for a long time. 1422 Sycamore Lane. I could have deleted it. Instead, I renamed it Dad's Sanctuary. If you liked the video, hit like and subscribe.